Hey everyone,
Hey, how we going?
welcome.
How's it going, guys?
Evening.
Welcome back to the stream. O'Grady here.
Anthony,
Lee and Anthony.
Yeah,
pointing is hard.
I know. I
Yeah,
was
you're up there. Well,
somewhere.
yeah, there we go.
At least I got us in the
Really,
right order
you're down
tonight, so that's
here. I don't
good.
know.
I
Yeah,
am
yeah,
me.
for sure.
Lee is him, and Anthony is him. So we're all in the same the correct spots tonight. It's a good
Yeah,
start.
we are.
Uh,
I don't have to pretend to be a developer.
No, don't you don't want to pretend.
I still kind of have to pretend to be a database guy, just not on this
It's all right,
show.
we'll forgive you.
Are you moonlighting?
You know, you just do what you gotta do.
He's using those skills wherever they're needed. That's what's happening.
Just glad I have them, honestly. You know.
See, if you have the skills, are you really pretending?
You know, that goes into last week's conversation about imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm not pretending. Maybe I just feel I'm pretending because of my own mindset and how I look at myself as a developer. So, honestly, yes, I'm also a database guy. I'll admit it.
There you go.
I'll admit it. I'll own it.
So funny story. I was at a company holiday thing tonight,
Yep.
and there's really only one person there I knew, and I'm so glad that he invited me and that he was there. So we're just talking about tech or whatever. And he says to me, he said, I was really surprised when you told me, that you'd never been a SQL developer. And, you jumped in and helped us and just really did a lot of good stuff. And he's paying me a compliment.
Yeah.
And I was like 4 seconds of words into deflecting. And I was like, wait a minute, I can own that. Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. See, and I think that is like kind of like we talked last week. That is one of those, if
Yeah.
you're aware of it being a thing, it's easier
sure.
to understand. Like, I'm getting a compliment, and all of a sudden I'm like, no. In my head, yeah, okay, you know what? I did do that. You're right. That's me being dumb. Thank you. You know?
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting.
And then,
Kind of interesting.
I'm glad that they said something. I'm glad that you resisted the urge to defend your imposter syndrome, and I really hope that you are feeling at least a little warm and fuzzy about it.
Yeah, I would say I am. I mean, it's nice to get a compliment, a genuine word of, hey, you did a really great job for us. And I was so surprised when you said you weren't a SQL developer because you seem to be just fine. Like, okay.
yeah, that's good to.
So
Oh, Bubbage, I would think it is. Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I don't speak Russian, unfortunately, but if you get anything out of the channel and you're able to, pick up on some stuff, yeah, feel free to hang out, and we'll work with you as much as we can as far as being able to understand. I mean, English seems better than mine as far as that sentence goes, so fine.
right. I've been in conversations recently where I've realized that people whose English is their second language is usually doing a lot better than the rest of us.
Oh yeah, I've had people
at
apologize.
speaking.
I'm like, no, you're so much better than I am. Oh, Lee, I was gonna ask about your shirt. During setup, I saw it. Is that a sequel
Do
shirt?
you want to show the? Do you
Yeah,
want to show the audience?
I'll show the audience here.
Three
SQL
SQL queries walk into a NoSQL bar. Some minutes later, they walk out again because they couldn't find a table. I like it.
It's
I'm
great.
wearing,
See,
I'm
I
wearing my Twilio
expected.
shirt. It's not as cool
I'm
at
just
all.
wearing a gray shirt. It's boring. Yeah, I expected it to be the usual SQL joke. They walk into a bar and they try to join a table. Some variation upon that. Yeah, but so I
It's a little
was
unique.
pleasantly surprised. Yeah, it made a left turn.
It's always nice when
So
you're
anyway.
expecting something and then it turns out to be something better.
That's the best jokes. That's the best movies. So yeah. So when you get those surprises, at work not so much. At work when you get that's
databases
usually
not so much. Don't want those surprises usually.
Yeah.
No.
Surprise. Yep, you're missing
Yeah,
a node. Surprise.
it's
Or
weird.
or here's a good surprise. I don't know if I told you guys this, and then we can try to segue into the
Hey, what's up, Spirit?
into a topic. Yo, spirits back. Um, so here's this was a very unpleasant surprise. So systems went down.
Okay.
We lost all databases because there was no VM host, right? It came back up. So everything starts booting back up. We're checking on things, and arguably one of the more important app dev SQL servers just isn't quite waking back up.
Okay.
I connect to them. I RDP to both of them. Well, I say both of them. There's three nodes, but the primary and the secondary that's not off somewhere else for DR. And I'm looking at both of them, and they're doing Windows updates.
Oh,
Both of them.
aren't those usually turned
They
off
were
on the
down.
servers?
Well, so as far as I understand, to be infrastructure guy, but from what I understand, they won't update themselves. Like they have precautions set up to make sure that they don't just say time for me update like this laptop will randomly, right? Like desktops will. The problem is they were turned off not on purpose, but because something happened and we lost the host they were on. So when they got turned back on, from the point of view of the operating system, it's like it's boot up time. I had an update ready. Let's engage.
Gotcha.
So I had to sit there. I had to sit there and explain to people like I can't do
Like I
anything
can't.
until updates are done.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry. And
That's
then
and that's one of
luckily,
those.
like
Yeah, you can't. There's no option. You can't be like, oh, let me turn off the
like
computer. That's probably
we
the worst thing.
chose we chose Windows, we chose Microsoft, and we all know what Microsoft how it feels about updates. You can push it off for a while, but eventually it's gonna happen.
Yep.
So
Nothing you can do
you
there
know,
except sit and wait for it to finish.
yep.
Oh, you got
Oh my gosh, it was crazy.
you got Bubbage. She saying or they. I'm not sure. He or she. They are saying they got HTML under the belt, CSS, JavaScript, JSX with React. Yeah, I mean honestly, CSS and JavaScript. If you are proficient in any of those or neither of those, uh, particularly JavaScript, because Angular 7 is pretty much just JavaScript. So I mean, anything if you're good at those two, you can pretty much work wherever you want.
Yeah, when you
Honestly,
go those two, you can jump into the other frameworks. And
I mean that's my
actually,
background as well. So I'm
yeah,
like I might be a little partial to that, but
yeah,
yeah.
just to be the guy with the pocket protector, isn't it technically TypeScript?
Well, that's
Angular?
what Angular is
Yeah,
TypeScript, but it's a JavaScript type language. Yeah,
yep.
that's like was it YAML versus JSON? It's just like doesn't have the commas. I'm like, well, this is annoying. Oh, there's two that were super close, except they didn't have commas. I'm like,
Yeah, no,
okay.
YAML's really different. Like
YAML uses
usually,
spaces, right?
yeah, YAML uses
Oh,
spacing and I don't know
yeah,
what term to use. It uses formatting as part of the language, kind of like Python.
yeah,
And so people who don't do that have a lot of trouble.
yeah.
And I love my JSON or JSON or whatever the internet wants to call it
I say
today.
JSON.
I say JSON all the time, but I'm it's become very popular to say no, it's JSON. I'm like, no, I know a few JSONs, and they don't. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, they're
But
not
yeah,
as
so
useful as a JSON.
yeah, but then if you like your JSON and then you go and you try to edit a YAML file,
Yeah,
it's kind of
and
difficult. It's
that's where
kind
I
of
am. So when I see a YAML, I'm like, what the hell? Freaking, what do you mean the
yeah.
space is wrong? What does it matter?
Same
Yeah.
thing when
What's
people use.
Oh,
Oh, we
so
got some
what's
stuff going on.
Spirit saying about him here? This would probably be more on your guys' side as far as SQL experience getting into
Yeah.
certain
So yeah,
positions.
yeah, I'll read that. So a lot of finance positions require experience with SQL. These positions require actual scripting or writing queries from scratch, or just like basic understanding of how it works or experience with something like Microsoft Dynamics GP. I really want to get back into being a finance guy. Accounting isn't what I see myself doing the rest of my life. Okay, so um, I, I have some experience working at a bank heavily in SQL. So it depends on the role. So I'm guessing if you're seeing roles that ask for SQL, then you're looking at some sort of analyst, whether it's business analyst, data analyst, or whatever they call it. Um, if you're not talking about strictly IT, then I saw plenty of people. And usually when you're saying, so what you say, something like writing with scratch or basically understanding how it works. No, if what you're talking about is an analyst role where they want you to figure things out, you're going to be
Mhm.
writing SQL. It may not be incredibly complicated or down or incredibly performant SQL, but yeah, there'll be heavily SQL. Um, yeah, the team I was on back at the bank, there was, when I joined the team, there's 10 people and all of them contributed lots of SQL every day. So yeah, if it's asking for SQL, they
And
probably actually mean at
and
least entry level. Go
Mhm.
on, Lee.
yeah, on the flip side of that, um, you could be the person sitting in accounting who is using a tool to access the thing that the analyst or data engineer built for you. And so you might be familiar with the reporting tool, whatever that happens to be, but and it might do queries under the hood for you, but you're just learning that tool. You're not writing SQL. So it
And it,
depends on what lane you want to be in.
I say it may be. I've even seen it where companies are using uh, like Excel or access tables, and like that is a form of SQL or database connections. But what is the difference? I guess between writing in, or do you know the difference between writing in Access and writing in SSMS?
Okay, so the languages, they're both a SQL variant. The languages are very, very similar. There's only a handful of differences. So I would say if you can learn ANSI SQL, or you can pick the database of your choice. Like, I don't know, we got a couple SQL Server fans in this call right now. Um, who, you pick your dialect of SQL that you have access to, so you can practice. And in my opinion, it's very transferable between accesses, plain Jane SQL and T SQL. And frankly, Oracle is at the bank, we used all three of those, and Oracle is very similar too, until you get to those certain points where they're not, and then you got to know some very specific functions and whatnot. But
Yeah.
um,
So
but
learn AS400.
Oracle and
So
AS400 is basically ANSI SQL,
yeah,
as
it
far as
is.
I
It's
know.
it's very similar
Yeah,
to basic SQL or T SQL and stuff as well. It's just different variants that you can't do.
there
But
was
so
a
for
brief period
Spirit
of
here,
time.
what would you suggest would be the best go to then? ANSI SQL, as far as starting out in a career where you may start using database development.
My answer would be just to learn whatever of the ones you just mentioned, a SQL dialect that you have access to, something where you can follow a tutorial and you can do the SQL work. So if that means access, especially if you're going into banking, banks are
Mm-hmm.
so full of access in Excel, whether we like it or not, whether we want to make
Yeah.
fun, it's making the world go around. And then when you are applying for a role, I and Lee, if you disagree, please rail on me. I think most people say you can do SQL, you can do competent SQL. We're doing this variant, you're hired. They're not going to say, oh, well,
Yeah.
you know, because like between the fact that you do a like statement in one language with a star and the language of a percent sign, you need to be told that once or twice and then you're golden, right?
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts,
That's
Lee?
true.
Um, so Spirit, if you're in a place, if you're already at a job that gives you access to some sort of database system that you need to query, or that you've been asked to query, or that you even just could query, maybe no one's asked you to, but it's there, you want to learn it, you you could ask for low level read only access. Hey, can I
Yeah.
uh, get access to this database? I want to learn SQL. We're using this Microsoft Access system, or we're using Oracle or SQL Server or whatever it is. So that's where I would start. If they just shut you down and tell you no, then I would, as much as possible, replicate what you have at work in some sort of lab environment at home, on your desktop, PC, your laptop, whatever. Oracle, you're not
Oh,
going to be able to do that because it has to be installed on the server, unfortunately. However, you could create a free a free tier license on AWS or
Yep.
Azure, and probably set up and play with Oracle if that's what was in your environment right now. And I completely agree with you, Anthony. Once you learn one variant, one flavor of SQL, the rest are so close that it doesn't really
Mm.
matter. I've never,
Yeah.
almost
It,
everybody
it's
that
not
I've
like the other
talked to,
languages.
right? It's not like it's uh,
JavaScript and TypeScript, like we were just talking about,
yeah,
where there are
yeah,
two different languages, but there's slight differences
Yeah.
between them. You know,
yeah. So hiring managers are going to be like, oh, you know how to query at Microsoft Access, and you've been doing that for 3 years. We have a SQL server. It's really similar. You'll pick it up fine. That's what they're going to say to you. So it's totally fine. Once you get experience with something, it'll translate, and people know that.
yeah. And thank you for pointing that out, Lee. I was the earlier in your answer there, you said talk to the people you work with. Maybe they have their own access databases or something to connect to. I was thinking, I guess I was projecting. I was thinking from the point of view of back when I need to learn this stuff before I had a job where I could ask that question. So I'm thinking,
Mm-hmm.
what can I learn as a guy with $20 in my pocket on my old computer, right? So that's a good answer. I threw in chat db-fiddle. You can go to the link right now and write SQL. Regardless, if I'm assuming that if you're here, you have something electronic device. So if you can go
Yep.
to that link, then you can actually type SQL and practice right now.
Yeah.
There's other things I thought like that. I just did it quickly to show.
Yeah, W3 Schools.
Yep.
Yeah.
w3schools.com. You can do the
That
same
works
thing.
with programming as well. You can do
Yes.
pretty basic programming on there, somewhat even more than basic, to just test stuff out. I use it all the time if I have like an idea that isn't fully flushed out. I'll kind of put my thoughts in there and mess with it until, let's say it's a button that I want to do something weird, whatever. I'll put it all in there until I kind of get the idea, the basic outline of what I want, and then I'll take that code and port it into my normal code. But it's definitely a good source. And we can make note of this if you want to put these into the Discord as well. We'll throw these in the Discord channel, and
Yeah.
if no one's in there yet, there's the Discord link, and we can throw that up. I still have some videos I need to drop in there from last week. It's been kind of a crazy week for me, so
I think
I have a new hole in my house though, so that's
you do. Why do you have a hole in your house?
They put a window
A
in
whole
today.
house, a whole new house.
Yeah. No, they put a basement window. I have a walkout
So bad,
basement,
Anthony.
so the back is framed. So they cut a hole in it for me and put a window.
Oh, okay.
They did it while I was working today. So, and it's literally directly underneath me, 2 floors down. So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
Boom,
every
boom,
single
boom.
hammer I felt in my feet because it just went right through the house. I'm like, oh my god. I'm on meetings and I'm like, I can't talk right now because
Yeah,
you won't hear me. So, just continue on.
Just turn up your
that
music
helps
really
with
loud.
getting things done.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like Chinese. It's like the
Wonderful.
worst water torture device thing ever because it's with a hammer. I'm like, this is terrible.
Yeah. So we've talked about a whole host of technologies already. I think it ties really nicely into what Anthony's lead topic was tonight, which is just
Yep.
architecture in general. Because, do you pick one thing like Oracle or MongoDB or whatever?
Hey, we use Mongo.
Or do you only write in C# and you don't hire anybody who does other languages? Or
What's your
do you plug
yeah.
all of them and figure out how to make them all work? So
Yeah, for sure. So we a couple of our conversations we've had already, I've heard you guys mention you know different strategies you've had in the past, different strategies you have now. So I was kind of curious, and I wasn't sure if it's okay, Grady, if you wanna lead off. You I wish I took notes. I remember
Let,
you mentioning your
let me
direction, and I
pause
got
you for
really
one.
curious.
Let me pause you for 1 second. Do you
Okay.
do you hear audio issues, Lee, from Anthony, or is that my internet
No,
causing it?
he's pausing. He's having
Okay.
Oh
I
no.
mean it's not the worst. It's a little choppy, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't on my end for the stream, since I'm the
Mm,
one streaming
no,
it.
it's not.
Okay.
It's mostly good. So we could just keep going. We'll see
Yeah, that's
what
fine. I
happens.
just again, I just want to make sure I didn't have to deal with the stream because I can lower the stuff to make it go faster and stuff. But it seems like it's just Anthony's end.
yeah. So
Okay,
I'm
continue. Sorry.
sending this. Yeah, I'm apparently sending this message from a bunker, an undisclosed location. So I apologize. I'll also try to slow down my speech just in case that helps. Yeah, I'm looking at the other screen now and I saw myself freeze. That's a bummer. Um, so yeah, I was just kind of curious, O'Grady, if you wouldn't mind kicking this off, because I remember you explaining some of the architecture choices that you're dealing with now, and also the fact that it sounds like, and this is more organizational, you don't have to mess with the database. So I
Yeah.
would be curious to hear from getting your job done, what does that look like? How does that all happen? How does that come together?
Okay. So yeah, as far as I can give you my perspective on it because as opposed to where we worked previously all together, um, I feel like that was more of a I don't want to say collaborative because that sounds like this is a negative, but it was more of a everybody kind of messed with the whole system more. Does that make sense? Like I was able to access SQL. I was also able to get into the dev servers. I was also get ready to, or I can get into the deployment servers. I could, everybody can kind of do everything. It was more of a amalgamation of everybody. Um, Whereas opposed to this one, which is why I say I can give my perspective on it, is it's more departmentalized, but in a good way, to where I, and again, we're gonna say this about a million times until we get to it. A topic we're gonna get to eventually is that I wear less hats now. I know,
Mhm.
I don't have to know everything, which is it's great.
I bet that helps.
it's it's really nice. So from my perspective, as far as accessing tables and databases, is that we're going through services. It's a, I mean, I know the old company was also service-based architecture, but we will,
It's
we'll
transitioning.
is it yeah, but we're hitting services that, and I'm not the one, I'm not on the team that wrote that service. So if we need something, instead of me
Hmm.
saying, "Oh, I need to hit this table," we need to plan that out. No, we say, "I need to hit this service." Well, what information do I need from that service? And if they say, or if we find out information that is not coming back, then we can call it explicitly. But usually we hit that service or we hit up that team that made that service and say, "Hey, we also need an endpoint to return XYZ that isn't currently being returned by your service." And they say, "Okay." They put it into their schedule. They get it done. Then we continue on with ours.
Okay. So is the front end uh basically
Sorry.
Angular? Is that what you were referring to earlier?
Yeah.
And
So
then
so front end's Angular, and then C sharp. I mean, we do .NET, but
yeah, so you don't work in the services then.
currently no, we're not building any services. Now in the future, do they switch team to say, "Hey, now your team's writing a service"? Very possible.
Oh, interesting.
And it is set up though to most teams only have one one thing they do. Currently, I have one application, maybe two, depending on how you look at it, because it's kind of one application that's split into two, and that's my team's only job is to
Mhm.
maintain, update, fix, change that application. I mean, it's a very large application for the company, but it's not me saying, "Hey, I have to figure out how to make this connect to the database and do this, this, and this." It's a much more, like I was saying, compartmentalized.
Compartmentalized.
Yeah, to where it's, I have this job. What's my job? Make this application work. Any
Mhm.
tethers that go anywhere else, I talk to the people that those tethers go to. Hey, I need this to come back. Cool, done. And we do have well, this is maybe an assumption, but they do have Mongo DB because the assumption is because they do offer training for it. So
Hmm.
I haven't gotten into that. I've only been in this place for 2 months, but so I'm not as far into the details of how the architecture works on everything. But so far, I'm enjoying
Gotcha.
it. I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying the fact that I don't have to find the table and column that I'm looking for and stop everything. Contact switching. Hell, that's a whole episode right there for you.
Yeah, it is.
Contact switching between, writing C sharp, like currently, and then going to SQL and pretty much forgetting everything I was just doing because it's been 10 minutes when I'm in SQL. And then I go back to C sharp. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't remember what I was doing. I'm like, I know I needed this
So
piece of information that I'm now holding. I don't know what I was doing with it though.
so what I'm hearing is basically 3-tier architecture. You have the front end, you have the mid tier, which is the services, and then you have the database. And
Yeah.
the database is basically obtuse. You just see the services. You're
Mhm.
compartmentalized to the front. Okay, so that's interesting. So,
Mhm.
and you said you do technically, if you needed to, you have access to the databases. Your front end can do a SQL call to
Yeah.
the
Yeah, you can
databases, whatever
do
those are.
you can
You can
still
skip that mid
do
tier.
inline direct calls. We do have that. It's not the way we did at the old company or in my old company, but
Yeah.
it's done in a similar fashion. It uses, just key and access code to get into it, and then you receive the data. You just have to. There's a config file or something we had that just kind of has all that
Handles all
stored.
that.
Yeah, and then we just kind of call it on the server. It reaches out and gives us back. Again, we try to keep those very basic because if it's anything larger, then we would outsource it to the people whose actual, who would make it cleaner and do it
Right.
properly.
And probably more reusable.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
This is like, oh, we need this one thing that no one's ever going to use except for this one place in this application. Okay, let's just get that information. That's fine.
Okay. So do you have any issues with the current architecture? Like what I've heard some positive things, mostly in your workflow. Is there any major negatives that you see? Anything
Not yet.
you miss or you've heard other people have?
I will say I
That
miss.
you would like.
I do enjoy being in SQL. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be doing all the stuff we did together just for, just for fun, unless I actually did
Well,
enjoy it
or
somewhat, or just for
yeah,
work even,
didn't.
because a lot of
Yeah,
stuff we
yeah.
did
I
together
think you want
wasn't
to
my
switch that.
job. Well, I mean, it wasn't my
Yeah.
job to do it. I volunteered a lot of the time to be like, no, I'm gonna go with Lee and Anthony. We're gonna go do this. Um, where if I really hated SQL, I would have just been like, nah, Anthony and Lee got it. They're fine.
Yeah. There's like this in the development world, this is like this need because it used to be a fad to not like SQL.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little unfair. I think a lot of us like SQL and it's going to be the way for the future for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
NoSQL
Yeah.
tried to, there's people who may try to make NoSQL, get rid of SQL, but
It's
NoSQL
just
is just
so
SQL sibling.
it's so powerful. You can
Yeah.
do so much with it to where you try to change it into like a more watered down version and then you don't get the results and everyone's like, well, this isn't as good. Well, yeah, it's not. You're right. There's not an argument there. It's not.
Oh, let's map reduce and then map reduce and then map reduce and map reduce. And I wonder why it's slower than just joining tables and getting and projecting out what you want. So
What's
yeah,
Spirit up?
yeah.
What's Spirit asking here? I saw Lee. You said he saw his question there.
Yeah. So Spirit says, "Oh, it says I know what to ask. What are the biggest challenges you guys face when working with senior management?" What I see myself doing is bridging that gap between those in the know of IT, data science, etc. Be as high level or as granular as you want. So, um,
I when I read that, I hear project manager or product owner,
yeah,
depending on what your company calls it.
hmm yeah,
Did you want? Do you want me
product.
to go ahead? Were you about to say something?
I was gonna let one of you take this. You know I have a
So
lot to say on it, but I will let one of you take this first.
Oh, right. I think I started talking, but I think Lee was already rolling. So let me know.
Okay.
yeah, I was gonna comment. I was just thinking about, the things that I've dealt with senior management. So I think it depends partly on the kind of person that you have in senior management. If that person's a people person and they see their employees as human beings, people, and not cogs in the wheel of the machine of their business, that that changes your interaction with them. Um, I think if your senior management has the perspective of we hired smart people and we need to let them be smart, that also changes things.
Mhm.
Some things that I've faced that were challenges were interacting with senior management folks who weren't on the positive side of what I just described. So, I've had some situations where a person would come into the business I was at. They were new to the industry. I'd been in that industry for 10 years, and they would ask me for data because they want to answer some question with data.
Okay.
But they wouldn't let me massage the data or do anything to it. They wanted the raw data. And I was like, in my head, I was thinking, but you don't know what any of it means.
Yeah.
It, I can dump numbers to you or whatever the data pieces might be all day long, but you have to understand the industry, and you have to be able to assign some sort of meaning to the data dump. Otherwise, data dump's useless.
Mhm.
And so I ran into situations like that where there were senior management folks who weren't willing to listen, who who just wanted you to give them the stuff and then go away. You're just like the data pipeline to them, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that was really unfortunate. Um,
So
in
how
those
did
cases,
you deal with that case, or how
um,
would you? I guess in your position.
so in the particular situation I'm thinking of, I ended up just giving them what they wanted, but I did tell my senior manager, who was a VP, because I had a really close relationship with him. He and I were we had worked well enough and with each other and long enough with each other that there was this anticipation that would occur between us. He would ask me for, hey Lee, can you build this report for XYZ customer?
Mhm.
And I would give him that, but I also knew that he's going to ask me for X, Y, or Z. So I would give him X, Y, or Z, and invariably he was excited to have it. He was like, I'm
Yeah.
so glad you put that in there.
Hmm.
Um, he trusted me and he
Yeah.
knew that I understood the industry we were in. So when I just had a data dump to this guy who didn't want to listen to anything I had to say, I let this other person, this vice president, know, hey, uh, Jim Bob over here just wants raw data. I'm not sure he understands what to do with it. I think it should look like this, but he won't let me do that.
Yeah.
So
Hey, what's up, Cave?
hopefully that helps, Spirit.
And it
Yeah,
looks like
I
it's a
would say that's
Velociraptor.
very similar to what I would have said. Without being the negative part of, obviously that could be taken into a very negative conversation about how to deal with people that don't know what they're asking for, or um,
Yeah.
but especially if the biggest problem I've seen, I would say, is whenever your senior management is non-technical in a technical field, which is kind of what Lee was going into, where they don't understand that you can make their life a lot easier by doing massaging data in your case, or they might not even know what to ask for properly, but they don't want to admit to themselves that they don't know that.
Yeah.
So they don't want to put off that, hey, I'm asking for data, but I don't know what I want. So they might just say, give me all this data. And from
Mm-hmm.
us, we're like, well, what are you using it for? We can make this easier for you. And like, just give it to me, because they don't understand actually what they're wanting.
Yeah.
That would be my one of my most frustrating type of experiences. And in that case, I I did that. I gave them the data. In that case, it's like, well, if you want it all, here it is. Now, a lot of times it would come back with a follow up question of, hey, is there a way to like make this organized? I'm like, well, yeah, I could have done that, but yeah. Or actually, usually what happens is they ask that, and then I give it to them like 1 minute later because I already did it for them, but I didn't give it to them.
Yeah.
But I'm also
Yeah.
an
That
asshole,
happens
so.
too.
So a couple of pitfalls that I've had to deal with. So one of them that you guys' scenario reminds me of. I got asked for a report, so I built it up and then I exported it and I sent it off to said leader, right?
Mhm.
And then a little while later, another leader, the one that's actually above me, similar to Lee's story, right? Someone kind of tangent asked
Yeah.
for something and part of my job. So here's the results.
Mhm.
They get it and they bring me up, have me come into the office, and then they start doing that thing where they throw it up on the screen and they start asking questions. Why is this like this? Why does this look like this? And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I realize the person who I gave the report to did manipulation to the data, right? They were rearranging things and they're trying to figure out their own answers because they didn't understand it.
Oh my
And then they're
goodness.
like, I can't make heads or tails of this. And they sent it off to the person that was above me. And it took a while because I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
I assume
Yeah.
the first question, Anthony, did you make this document? And I look at it and it looks like my document. So of course I said yes.
Yep.
And then now I'm like, well, after a while, I was in this like bit of a bind where I was like, I had a backpedal. So it has the right name and it looks like my data, but this has been changed. And I was like, can you give me 5 minutes? I can go back to my office and get this to you. So, and then
Right.
we realized what happened. But that was after like 40 minutes because I just wasn't prepared mentally to realize that it wasn't my data. I was like, oh, I couldn't answer any of his questions. The other scenario is, and this was told to me very early on in my career, um, you know, you've got to be prepared to tell people that we just don't have that data.
Yeah.
So, when I was working for the bank, there's just tons of data. I sometimes people I work with now will say we have a lot of data and it's like minuscule compared to how much data we had that went back so far in time from all these different sources from other companies that are bought by other companies that originally bought this other company. And they would ask a question and sometimes you have to give them a hard answer. And it's the hard thing to do, especially in your career. We don't have that, or
Yeah.
it's going to take weeks for us to do that, or I need a team to figure that out, right? And those are the hard answers because they're the truth. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can tell your boss no, basically, but when it's someone higher up, it gets really hard to say no. That that doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
I think that's also difficult, at least for me. I don't know about you guys. I think it's kind of in our industry to say I can't do that. For me to say that. Like, because I feel like every time someone asks me something, I'm taking it as a challenge almost. If it's something
yeah, no,
that's more
100%.
difficult, if I have to come back and say I can't do that, like that hurts me. So I
Yeah.
feel like I am that, like, well, we can get this done. When in reality, sometimes you can't get it done. If you don't
I,
have the table or don't have the data, it's not gonna happen.
I feel that, Grady, 100%. That
I
that is
know.
that's why I said
I know you
it's
do.
such a hard thing.
Yeah. I've been in situations where, well, I thought of two situations that were kind of that were related to the senior management question, but and the whole question of not being able to get data. So in one scenario, There was a customer in an industry I was in who asked me for a particular data point
Yeah.
because they figured that it's there, and this customer doesn't. Knew the industry only from his side, not
Okay.
from my side as the person sitting in a company who was providing him a service. And I had to tell him that what you're asking me for just isn't available. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, it's that it is literally impossible
Yeah.
because the data that would have to be there just isn't. And then I've also been in scenarios where like the CEO or COO is I'm in the room with that person with a customer, and that person tells the customer, "Oh yeah, we can do that," in response to some question, and I'm sitting in the meeting dying because I'm like, "No, we can't."
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what we're gonna do, but you just told them we could do it. Um, and
Fair.
in that particular case, I don't remember what happened. I just remember that the customer asked for XYZ, and someone way above me said, "Oh yeah, sure, we can do that." I was like, no, no, we can't. So I don't know.
There was an interesting scenario, and I'm going to preface this with I am 100% stealing this from a TV show, and I look forward to the moment that Lee realizes what show I'm stealing this from. So, Lee, tell me when you realize what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So the higher up person um, asks his underling to take care of something, to solve a problem, and that problem was very difficult. And so the engineer said, "We can't do that." Well, leadership brought him to task and said, "No, I order you to figure out this problem, period." So over the course of, again, I already said it was a show. Over the course of the show, you see him trying and trying and trying. And so he was ordered to not say he couldn't do it. So eventually he gave a demo. It wasn't successful. And then he said to the commanding officer, he said, "We absolutely could do this. It'll take 3 teams of our about 8 years, and then we'll definitely have this figured out." And that was one of my favorite scenes. Lee, just figured out. Yeah, I see you processing. Oh,
No, I haven't. I'm trying to figure out what this is from.
I'm about to out myself as a geek, but that's okay. Joy LaForge and Captain Picard in Star Trek Next
Ah,
Generation.
yes.
There's an
You're
episode
right.
where
On the
Data was
reactor.
on a planet, and so they could not transport
Oh,
from
the
the planet's
transporter.
surface.
Mhm.
And then like we need to get them up off of there because some bad, hand
Interesting.
wave space stuff.
Oh,
And then Jordy was constantly trying to
Remember that.
teleport these dummies back and forth. And then at the end, he's like, "Oh, we absolutely could do this. I just need about 3 teams of our best engineers in about 8 years
Yeah.
and 8 years." And so I love it. But anyway, that's
Good
like the
episode.
opposite of the story I told earlier, though. You got to be able to tell people no, but it was
Right?
still a cute story.
yeah, yeah,
It's one or the other.
It's a TV show and we can't teleport. So
Yet.
yeah.
anyway, so yeah, keep the questions coming, guys.
Yeah, definitely.
But it seems like we're sending emoticons back and forth.
That's
Hopefully
usually how
my audio and
chats
visual.
go. You just send a
Yeah.
bunch of emotes back and forth, and then that's just how people talk.
All right. So I'm going to segue over to Lee. So
Yeah.
I was asking Grady here about his, and it seems like right now, or at least how he explained it, he's not interacting with the database much, right? He's
Mhm.
got the privilege of just telling someone else to build him an endpoint. Um, so um, you are deep down in the trenches as far as databases and everything, and you can explain as much or as little. I don't know what kind of agreements you have with people, but I'm really curious if you get to see how different companies architect as far as attaching a database, right? Like, are you able to see that? Do you know how that works?
Sure. Sure. So 3 scenarios or in 3 different companies actually kind of come to mind. And it ties into one of the things I don't like, or a perspective about databases that I don't like. So in the first case, there's a company who really leans into what a particular vendor offers in terms of features and gadgets, let's say. And they develop based on things that that vendor offers, and they could do some really cool stuff. They were all in on this particular vendor, and I liked it because I happened to be an all in on this vendor also, and it helped me learn about that particular vendor's offerings. So then there's the in the a later company, I had a developer look me straight in the eye and say, uh, the database is a dumb container. And I was shocked and like,
Did he? Are you sure he didn't mean his head?
So I want to clarify.
well,
He said the database is a dumb container, or his preference is for the database to be a dumb container.
That is two different things.
yeah, well,
That shows. Do you know what?
yeah,
Do you have an understanding of databases, or do you just not like databases?
I would say the answer to first question is they thought they did, but I would say no, they didn't. And the answer to the second question is they feel like they like databases, but they really don't. What they like is their application stuff that they're familiar with.
Yeah.
And in fairness, maybe that's why I don't like what they said, because I'm familiar with the database side. I'm not familiar with their application side. So,
It wasn't me that said this, was it?
oh no, this is before you guys.
No, I
I'm
remember that
sorry.
conversation, Grady. You said his databases were dumb.
That's
what you
that's
said.
what it was. That's what it
Dang.
was. No, I think I said that.
I
I'm
would
not
just
gonna
like
get
to
into
point out I inherited the databases we all worked with. Okay.
Yes.
And
At that
then,
point, they were all dumb.
but they were so friendly.
They were all
They were-
dumb until Lee came by and
Actually,
was
no,
like,
none of them were friendly.
"What are these?" We're like, "Oh, it's our database." They're like, "He's like, no, this is just a pile of data. I will help you."
Yeah. So then there's this idea that the database should just be a dumb container, and we're going to treat it like that, which means we're not going to hook into anything proprietary or that couldn't be moved somewhere else. If someday we want to pick this sucker up and drop it into MySQL, we ought to be able to do that. And my question is, why? Now, I know there's like 4 million answers to that question, and I might start a fight with somebody, or maybe just the chat people. I don't know. But my question to you is, okay,
Did you hear that, chat? That was a challenge. Bring it
yeah,
on.
Fight him.
unless you're actually thinking very seriously, we might leave platform X. To me, it doesn't make sense to treat the current platform as a dumb container, because you limit yourself, you limit the capabilities of your application because you refuse to use things that are tied to a particular vendor. But unless you're going to leave the vendor and you're doing it, why not leverage what's there to make your life easier, because it will help you not reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
for example, I'm going to use something that came from a conversation that started before this stream. You could use triggers on tables to keep track of all the changes that happen to them. That's certainly a valid method that is transportable to another platform. However, your developers in my opinion, will burn up trying to maintain that. Instead, you could use SQL Server temporal tables in the SQL Server platform to keep track of changes that happen in tables. And it is way simpler to set up than triggers. And it's also going to be better for your performance because triggers can cause performance issues. Temporal tables do not. There's also another feature called Ledger in the Microsoft platform that's kind of an extension of temporal tables, and it's been as an auditing feature to. So if you're in an industry maybe like PCI where you have to prove that your data hasn't been tampered with or that it can't be tampered with, then Ledger gives you that. Well, as a software engineer, data engineer, whatever kind of person, you could build or you could try to build something like that, but you're reinventing the wheel. And if you're already on the platform that gives you a solution, then to me, it just makes sense to use the solution if it fits your needs. Don't worry about whether you're going to leave Microsoft SQL Server if you're not actually seriously contemplating doing that. Now,
Yeah.
I realize that some architects then might say, yeah, but then if I ever want to leave, then I can't. But a meteor might hit the planet too. Like,
That's why I have disaster recovery on the moon and Mars.
exactly. It's don't plan for what. In that case, don't plan for someday you might move off this platform. That just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me. I don't
Unless
know.
you're actively making a plan to move off that platform, then it's like okay. But
Yeah, and then other platforms probably have similar features
Mhm.
that you could move to. You could redesign stuff if you had to. I don't know.
So I just want to clarify the people who hear me booing earlier. Um,
it
I
was at
personally don't
Lee.
like.
Oh,
No, it was Natalie. I'm personally not a fan of triggers, but there's a lot of things that they are good for. And I just want to make sure I'm not booing and someone out there hears like triggers are absolutely evil. I'm personally not a fan. I feel like every time I add triggers to a database, I'm adding tech debt. But that's just my opinion. So just that's not
Yeah.
like well established by a lot of people. But I might boost some more later. Go ahead, Lee.
maybe
Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Anthony?
Oh, I thought you said you had 3 different scenarios.
Um, what was the third one? I did, but then I got going.
they all
Um,
kind of got combined. One
So
major scenario.
so
well,
basically I was asking, oh, go on.
yeah, go ahead, rephrase. Maybe that'll help me, Anthony.
So what I was saying was, what's the different ways that you've seen someone, interact with a database, connect to it, anything along those lines?
Ah,
You're in the trenches, so you see a lot of different companies do a lot of different things. So I wasn't sure if we're privy to like different strategies.
yeah. Whatever that third thing was, it's gone.
Fair enough.
So as I'm thinking more about the question, I mean, there are different kinds of just architectures in terms of, am I going to be physical, use physical machines, virtualization? If I'm going to virtualize, what kind? Is it VMware? Is it Hyper-V?
Mhm.
Am I going to go to the cloud or am I not? If I go to the cloud, am I going to use virtual machines? Am I going to use some kind of platform as a service like an Amazon RDS or an AWS managed instance? And I think a lot of those decisions depend on time that you're allowed. So, for instance, in the situations I'm in now, a lot of it is just lift and shift. That's what we have time for.
That's super popular.
Yeah.
And
It's the gateway drug.
it is. And I do think there are benefits to lift and shift, not just besides we're just getting rid of our physical data center, but there can be benefits to lift and shift. But it also means you're not leveraging the cloud really. You just changed clouds
Yeah.
from yours to someone else. I really would, encourage people in terms of architecture to look at a managed instance or something like Azure SQL DB, which doesn't, as far as I know, really exist on AWS. And I could be wrong, but um, they, as far as I know, just have Amazon EC2, which is VNs, and then um, RDS, Relational Database Service. They don't really have that third thing that Microsoft has, which is they just give you a database. Because, I mean, they're depending on the skill sets you have in your company, there's could be a good need for just a database that everything else is managed because it's just the founder and maybe one or two developers, and you guys, you're the group, the team is trying to build an application.
Yeah, size is definitely a factor in architecture for sure.
Anyway.
See that.
So okay, so there's sometimes the applications stand alone, right? I'm thinking like a game app, we'll load up solitaire. Its own, it has its own internal stuff. Your contacts in your phone, what used to be, probably now it's connected to the cloud, so
Yeah.
used to open up its own database on the machine. Was it SQLite, I think, originally in Android. And so that would be technically two tier, where there's an application that's talking to a database. Then there's also like what O'Grady was saying, three-tier architecture, where you have a front end service, a front end, it's client side. Then there's a mid-tier, which in the case that he pointed out would be service architecture, but it isn't always. I remember, like we talked about a previous employee you had, where Java was in the between, but the Java really wasn't doing anything, right? There was a whole class of applications where at the place that we both worked at, where the front end was whatever variant of JavaScript, and then it talked to Java, but all Java did was grab what was passed the request and then hit the database. There was no real secret sauce. There wasn't service architecture. It was just an in-between layer that understood what things were.
It was essentially a mock service. I mean, it was acting as a service would in between a database and a front end.
Yeah.
Except we actually wrote it out to be part of the application as opposed to be something that is able to be used other places. And
right. And the distinction there is, where is the business logic, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can architecture.
Yes. Where is the business logic?
Where is the business logic?
I may or may not be leading up to stuff. So in that architecture we're just talking about, it's in the front end, in the JavaScript, whether that's Vue.js or Angular, or it's TypeScript, which just gets compiled down to JavaScript, or jQuery everywhere. In that particular architecture, the business logic was almost, but not completely, in the front end.
Yeah.
The mid-tier just accepted the requests, took it to the database. It sounds like the situation you're in now, Sean, is the service architecture, where the front end asks the service and that does the business logic.
Yep.
And I've also seen some scenarios, and this pops up every once in a while, especially when there's a hard database problem to solve, where they end up putting, I see this a lot in two-tier, where they put a lot of business logic in the database. So the front end can just ask for a thing and then the business logic happens there. And this is, if they're organized, this will end up being in stored procedures, something like that. So you can organize it all together.
And again, I will say, I don't know how the service teams are split up. They might have a mid-tier backend that they deal with. So, that's something eventually I'll learn and pass on new knowledge of architecture.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, like, let's say you end up, you said that you guys bounce around. Let's say you end up messing around the service layer, you get into that sweet C# language, and you do that work. You might find out there's multiple layers. Like sometimes you see a service layer, and then there's like GraphQL in between. There's something kind of abstracting all the databases, or there's a Redis cluster or some sort of caching. I don't know why I got stuck on that word. There could these architectures can be very complicated sometimes, where you're caching in between. Cachings can be, if you're really worried about performance, can be a big boon, because the fastest query is the one you don't have to run, right?
100%.
Yeah. So um yeah, I feel like where I'm at right now, we have exact architecture we're just talking about, where we have our older apps. We tend to call them the legacy apps, so whatever we like to label things, where the mid tier doesn't do a lot of business logic. It's just like you ask for a thing, and instead of being a stored proc, it's just running its query. And we're transitioning to more of a service-based architecture, where we have a team supporting the requests at the front end. Like, hey, like you said, we need data. We need this kind of data. Can you make us a mid-tier feature? And we've just started getting, recently it's become very important. Well, let me phrase this. Recently, it's been discovered that having database professionals is really important, and losing one can cause a lot of pain. And so
Interesting.
people have,
Oh.
so we're building up our database skills now, and it's awesome. Painful to find people, though.
Yeah.
Painful to find people, but it's starting to build up, and then the mid to developers will have more people to rely on for that sweet SQL syntax sugar.
So how would
Anyway,
you describe? We've been talking about how all of our architectures are kind of set up or things we've seen. How would you describe what you would say is the ideal architecture in your mind?
well, I really like where I work, but I do not work for Tony Stark, so I don't. There's not unlimited budget, so you can
Yeah.
never make an ideal one, right? All of this, and we'll have play fights more often than not about the different choices that we can possibly make. But in the reality, it's all about trade-offs.
Yeah.
If you got a small team and you have one front-end developer and you have one DBA slash database developer slash data engineer, he's doing all the things. You very well could end up with all the logic in the front end and you're just doing SQL calls. Or the exact opposite. You could end up all business logic is in the database, and it's stored procedures, and whichever one of those triggers you more, it might seem okay to fault them, but it's a trade-off. It's a small team, and as a team grows, maybe you do want service architecture, right? Whether or not the SQL code is stored in the mid tier or in a stored proc, it depends on what your goals are and what you end up wanting or what you're afraid of.
Yep.
Sometimes decisions are fear-based, right? Vendor lock-in. We discussed downtime. We discussed some of that stuff, right? So this is not an ideal.
I'm afraid of poor performing queries.
I'm also afraid of poor performing queries. But does the query?
I'm the one that writes the poor performing queries. So.
No, Sean.
Not anymore. You're not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
Not anymore.
You're playing in JavaScript's land, CSS.
There were just so many times I was like, Anthony, this works. I get the data back. It takes like 45 seconds. Can you do something?
Yeah.
And Anthony's like, yeah, not write it like that. I'm like, okay.
Oh, I never said that.
No, I'm just joking.
Anthony's not a
but that conversation has happened where I'm like, hey, this is just, I'm a developer. Well, I'm a software engineer. Sorry. So, there's times when I'm writing something and I'm like, I just need that data, and I get the data in a messy way because I don't even know if that's truly the data I need. I don't know if that's going to be the final call. Maybe I'll be able to, ask for 10 things at once instead of this one thing that I need for testing. So then by the time I get done and that query is still sitting there, I now know, okay, I need 3 things that are in that query that I'm pulling back. But I don't have the technical expertise to say, hey, I have it this big. It works. I need it this big. Can you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Anthony's like, well, yeah. And like 3 minutes later, he's like, here, thank you.
So,
but yeah,
okay.
Now I don't deal with that as much, but yeah.
So you said ideal, but I'm gonna. But I didn't want to say what one's better than the other. But I can tell you, I have some preferences, right? And I
Yeah,
do
that's why I want
like,
to know your
yeah,
preference
yeah.
on what you would want.
I like compartmentalization. So if you're big enough to handle and have teams of a front end and a mid tier, and your back end people, I definitely prefer that, right? So it's okay that the mid tier person may not be a SQL genius, right?
Ah.
But they know what they want. They can try to get it, and they can ask for help, right?
Hold on,
I
wait.
definitely have a
I broke everything. There we go.
broke everything. But if you have database professionals or like a dev DBA or SQL developer that has their back, then I think that works really well, right? Um, I think we're going down that route now, where there's somebody who can assist the mid tier people because they're writing their fast whatever, and then they're in the database, and then it's not so fast anymore. We'll work on that. And then there's a bit of an argument about where should a SQL be stored, right? And I think when I said that a minute ago, Lee said, "Well, I want it to be fast." Were you alluding to if the SQL's in the mid tier, it won't be fast anymore, or what were you alluding to?
I'm going to put something in here, and it is relevant to the question. It should not be-
Oh, the suspense is killing me. I see a creeper.
That was me.
Okay,
You're always the creeper.
so I'm not against queries being in the mid tier. However, a dentist should not be an oral surgeon. Just because you can
Yeah.
work your way around someone's mouth and fix cavities and that kind of stuff
Lee said,
doesn't
"Work your way
mean
around someone's mouth."
doesn't mean that you can uh, that you should be in there extracting teeth or doing something more in depth.
Yeah.
Just because you're familiar with the the other parts, the physical environment of dentistry. That doesn't make you an oral surgeon. You could do it.
Yeah.
Your patient probably wouldn't like you very much if they survived, but you could do it.
It's
Just
like yeah,
because,
having a mechanic paint a car. It's like
yeah,
just because you know everything about a car doesn't mean you know how to paint it.
yeah,
It's like
that's a good another good analogy. So yes, shots fired. Um,
I'm waiting
the thing
patiently.
is, here's the thing that here's what I wanted to get to, um, and it goes back to your question about you asked me earlier about people being familiar with the database enough or feeling like they understand them. And I think that we like to say people know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Very true.
that's on my tombstone.
well-meaning well-meaning people, including me sometimes, I'm sure, learn just enough to be dangerous. They can get what they need, but they do it in a way that's not particularly ideal, and they don't realize that. And they do it, and then they teach other people at their company to do it that way. And then at some point, someone realizes they have a performance problem, and they look around. They got nobody to fix it because they don't know why. And someone says, "We need a DBA."
Oh,
So
so
you
this scenario was a place that did not have a DBA, or are you saying the DBA wasn't involved?
this is a situation where the company didn't have a DBA,
Okay.
and yes,
Okay.
I ended up being that DBA. But I think this happens all the time. And the reason I think this happens all the time is because I've lived this several times, where companies I'm at a company,
It's part of growing, right?
and
Yeah.
Like it's
yeah,
part of the
it's
growth,
part of
right?
going. And I think that by the time a company thinks they need to hire one DBA, they should just hire two. But that's a different conversation.
Anthony, you should get that
So
on your tombstone. If you're gonna hire one DBA, just hire two.
Let's hire two.
Just hire two.
Actually, I've actually said something very similar to that recently a lot. So as you were, Lee.
So the DBA comes on and they start running some queries, pounding their keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then they pound it slower and slower because their head is hurting from what's coming up on the screen. And they're like, wow, well, I can give you 10 reasons why it's slow. Not the least of which is this is the specific thing. This is the specific mistake that I see happening. Not the least of which is, you're absorbing a bunch of memory or wasting memory in your SQL Server
Mm-hmm.
because you're issuing literal strings with hard-coded parameters for the same exact query 10,000 times in the same day, the same query. It's just different parameters, different values in there. And you're killing your performance because you don't know not to do that.
All of those being cached. They're not parameterized. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, they're just sitting in the SQL Server memory, wasting memory because a lot of those I see it over and over. 2/3 of those kinds of queries are ran one time, and usually people don't have, or oftentimes in situations like this, because again they don't know their database world because they're in their world. They know development, they know software engineering, and they've been asked to do this other thing over here. Great. But because of that, there are just certain things that they're not aware of. And so they don't have things like optimized for ad hoc workloads turned on, which would free up that X gig of memory that you're wasting and make it available for other things. When you fill up your memory with stuff, then you can't hold as much in the memory, which means that your SQL Server is now doing more I/O. So you're burning CPU to get things off of disk that you can't keep in disk because you already have too many things, or that you can't keep in memory because you already have too many things in memory. And you have this vicious cycle happening.
Yeah.
Because
The
you
second
just don't.
fastest query you can run is the one that's coming from RAM, right? Well, the results are all in RAM.
Yeah, it's the one where you can get the data from what's in your memory already. So I don't know. That's just one thing I've that I've seen. I've seen kind of misuse of Entity Framework because um, someone didn't set things up right. And I'm going to tell you, I've never used Entity Framework. I've just felt the pain of it being misused. So in the same company, Entity Framework was used to build this database, and almost every single column is in varchar max or varchar max. And nobody really understood why that was a problem. And I was like, oh, let me count the ways.
Say, Lee, you're the one that told me that was a problem and told me why it was a problem. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, and this, again, this,
It's like,
this
what
is
are you
not a
storing?
knock
I'm like,
against.
I don't know, a bit. He's like, why is it a varchar max? I don't know.
Is it true or false? Yeah, we need about 8,000 characters there just in case. It's a really true
No, you
statement.
don't. But honestly, I mean, guys, this isn't a knock against, developers, software engineers,
Oh, yeah.
whoever. If you, this is never going to happen. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. If I learned C#,
Yep,
and
Welcome.
started developing stuff,
We'll embrace you with open arms.
come to the dark side.
yes, and then you would be like, then you would punch me in the kidney for doing stupid things, because that's all my knowledge allows me to do, is the stupid things that
Yeah.
kind of gets me what I want.
Yes.
And I'm using that stupid things as harsh, it's
Well, no, yeah, no, it's the basics
I'm using the
that
technical
you know.
knowledge I have.
Yeah.
It's just not really enough.
Yeah, I really want to respond to stupid things when there's a chance. I'm queuing up stuff.
Anyway, go ahead. Here's your chance.
Oh, okay, awesome. So here's the thing. This is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing in the past when someone allowed engineers who didn't have a lot of DB skills. I shouldn't say DBO skills because that's not even what I'm talking about. DB skills to write their own queries or decide how they're going to enter the database. They made bad decisions. Therefore, I'm going to, instead of picking on the fact that they didn't have database skills, I'm going to say, I don't want them to be near it and I want to keep it over here on my side of the fence. That's what I'm effectively hearing, right? So let me ask you this. Let me ask some leading questions.
Lee looks like he has a response that he doesn't want to say.
Do you want to respond real quick? I have some. I want to go somewhere with that, but you can respond if
No,
you want.
I'm not saying that we should kick them out. Well, yeah, I'm not saying we should kick them out.
You want them making direct? Do you want them making the stored procs?
What I'm saying is, stop putting words in my mouth. Let me finish.
You can tell me no. You want them writing the stored procs?
Do I want that person writing stored procs?
Yes.
No.
Do you want that person? Okay. Go
What
on.
I want is for them to find a database professional who's focused on the database tier, who they will listen to and learn from, and not just say things like the database should be a dumb container.
It's just SQL.
You're saying that, in my opinion, because you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. That's true.
You know C#. You know how to tell the application, hey, when you display this phone number in the UI, don't let someone put XXX, XXX, XXXX, because that's not a phone number. You know how to stop that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? So does the database. You just don't know how to do it.
So let's say, if as a developer, let's say I'm hypothetically, I'm a full stack. In fact, I'm a 10x full stack developer. Super elite.
You're a unicorn employee.
I am a super elite unicorn who happens to have thumbs so I can use the keyboard. Are you saying that I should put when I enter the database, I should put my SQL statements in the database?
Should put my SQL statements in the database.
Right. So I have a query I want to run, and again, I'm full stack.
Leading.
I am leading 100%.
I know. I think Anthony's pushing
trying to
to
let
something
me hang
here.
myself somehow.
Yeah. So I have a SQL statement that I want to run. I want to select. It's for admin panel. I'll give you an example. I'll try to give you an example, and I want to list all the users. So select users. I didn't say star. Select users from the table. Where, and then it's an integer for the page or something, right? Or it's so I'm going to parameterize it because I'm a little savvy. I'm not going to hard code it. Am I going to? Are you saying I should not have that SQL statement in the mid tier? I should just make a proc.
I'm saying I'm okay with you doing it in the mid tier as long as it's a parameterized statement, as long as you know how to do that. If I do like stored procedures, and I know this is where you're going.
I don't dislike stored procedures, so
and there are reasons for that, and there are reasons. So an objection just popped into my head, which is, but what about parameter sniffing? And that's what a really savvy data engineer, software engineer, whatever, SQL developer would say. And what I would say to you is, but SQL Server 2022 has a fix for that.
Raise your hand if you have SQL Server 2022 in your work environment right now.
Well, obviously not.
Okay, objection.
But there are ways to deal with parameter sniffing even right now.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And that was your objection to what? Stored procedures. So
well, I was just saying
ad hoc queries,
make that as an objection.
Well, I would tell that person that ad hoc queries that use parameters can also have issues with parameter sniffing. So that is not argument for either way, right? So yeah. So I object to the person who's objecting to your statement. I got your back, Lee.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I was asking that question was, and we've segued from general architecture to a very specific point, but that's okay. I I think it's okay for the mid tier to have the SQL code, to have control over what it wants to call, right? And that's what I was trying to get you to say definitively, like, is it bad? And you said no, it can be in there, but you have concerns, right? It's forgive me, but I don't know I said this earlier. It's a decision based on fear. There's a worry that a non-savvy person, someone who doesn't have the right skills, will be writing queries that will affect your database. And I think that is
It's
something
not an
that people don't.
unwarranted worry.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not. It's not.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not. It's definitely not unwarranted, right? But that's something that I think that a lot of engineers
Mhm.
who focus on the mid tier or the front end don't realize, right? As a DBA, we see things from the point of view of how healthy the environment is.
Yeah.
This database
He
is
said
performing, huh? I did.
Anthony's
said we.
embracing the
100%.
DBA.
Go ahead.
I mean, I wear a
Should I
lot of
change?
hats, so
Do I need to change your title?
I'm all over the place. You know what? You can just make that thing do a random loop through a handful of things, and it might never be wrong. So
It's fair.
yeah, I'm still very much in the trenches as far as the
Yeah,
database.
you are. Go ahead.
But what a lot of engineers who don't focus on that don't realize is that that's what we're thinking, right? We're thinking, how does this affect our database? Are we going to be able to keep the same throughput? Are we going to be able to, are we going to be turning memory all the time where we have to keep hitting the disk and bring up the same tables over and over again, round robin, right? We're thinking about that. Yes.
We're also thinking about, is your query going to wake me up at 3 a.m. because the server's crashing because your query is horrible?
100%. So we're thinking about that. And,
Yeah.
but from the point of view of from the engineer or the developer or whatever term you
Yeah.
want to use for this, from the powerful C# developer, is it fast enough for me, and does it get the job done, and is the product manager going to be happy that we're delivering on time, right?
Yeah.
So there's two different views there. So my argument is, I happen to like having certain parts of it. There's times where stored procedures are perfect weapons, right? There's also times where you need the more entrenched database people to control the code for one reason or another, and it's the database. But having in the mid tier, when you're going to have a team of people who are going to be responsible for writing the SQL, also makes sense. But I want to piggyback on what you said, Lee. There needs to be database professionals involved, right? I don't actually think that you take it and put in the database so the mid-tier people can't write code. Protects you from having poor judgment, right? It doesn't. You're just making more work for yourself, or your DBA team is going to swell up. And in the end, I think the best thing is to have, like, and you made this point already, have a database professional that works with them that says, hey, I see that you wrote this query and it's collecting whatever, and you have a lot of logic in your predicate, right? No, we need to do something else. We can't do that, and here's why, and let me show you. And then they get better, and then you have eventually, if you're lucky, you have a whole squad of mid-tier developers who know enough not to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I go on.
That's a big. I was gonna say it's a big distinction between developers, because you do have both of those. You have the ones that know enough to be dangerous, and that's it, like we've discussed, and then, like you just said, the ones that know enough not to be dangerous.
Right.
I think that line, getting past that line, right on the other side of that line, I'll say, is where most developers, I feel, should be. I feel like they should just be. They don't need to know everything about SQL. Like, I don't know everything about SQL, but I know enough that I know
I'd argue none
how
of us
not
do.
to break stuff when I'm doing it. I know the common standard practices that you should follow. I'm not saying I always did follow them, but I know them. That's the line that I don't know if it's through education, just developers have to teach themselves, or is that something that a DBA would maybe push toward toward the developers, saying, "Hey, it'd be really good if you guys learned these 5 classes on Pluralsight, or whatever you're
It,
going over."
Yeah.
I'd say it's a little bit education, but it's typically, realistically, it's been mostly mentorship or just collaboration, right? Again,
Yeah.
instead of you write the SQL query and then it just goes out, which database professionals could do it too. You have access to database, you just update your proc because you know what you're doing, right? Well, we all make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
We forget things.
That's true.
Code reviews, right? I personally think even the DBA, the data engineer, the database developer should submit the code for code reviews, if only just to
Yep.
let other people see how they accomplish things. They ask questions like, why the heck is your code so ugly? Right? A lot of people think that's really important. And you say, well, because we need to have an or in the predicate, and that was causing things to be very slow. And if I split this in half and have the two logics and stack them on top of each other, all of a sudden it takes milliseconds instead of seconds, right? And like, I hate it, but I'll accept it.
Yep.
Or people can catch your problems, or if it seems good enough to the developer, the DB, the database, the SQL developer can notice it and say, actually, this is what you want to do, or whatever. Yeah, I think it's mentorship and collaboration mostly is how that stuff gets around, which is why I take the stance that I do, that I think the mid-tier, if they're writing SQL, should have, either one of them should be really solid, or they should just straight up have a SQL developer, a database developer, whatever you want to call it.
So this is something I just thought of a tweet that I responded to, and a whole bunch of other people retweeted and then responded to yesterday. That was essentially, it was gatekeeping, and I'm going somewhere with this. There's an assumption that that DBAs have been developers. Like SQL
like that you
developers.
started out as developers, or that
that they started out as developers,
yeah.
or that all database administrators can whip up a massive hodgepodge of SQL that runs in 2 milliseconds.
DBA is too generic of a term. Yeah.
Perhaps. But my point about that is, saying, you're not a DBA unless you can do these things. You're not a DBA unless, or a database professional, unless you've passed all the T-SQL certs and you've done all the things with SQL. Like, you have to know all the syntax, and you have to
right,
know all the permutations and all the weird cool things that you can do with SQL that you can't do with the UI, and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, just like there are different kinds of developers, there are different kinds of DBAs. Some
right,
like if he ever comes back to the light side again, like Anthony, who's had a development background. Of course, I'm teasing. That would give a person like Anthony a certain strength, a certain lane. But if you ask Anthony to set up a multi-subnet failover cluster for an availability groups, he could do it, but he's going to struggle because it's not the thing he's focused on. If you ask me to do that, I could do it for you without I'm still going to look up a couple of things, but
be like, again.
No, so us developers do that too. If Stack Overflow goes down, productivity will drop throughout the entire world.
Yes.
That's probably not far from true.
I'm gonna get a shirt that just says I Googled it. Like,
yeah.
That's
yeah.
What do you do? I Google things for a living. I don't know. Like,
we know what not to copy.
Yeah.
Go on, Lee. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. So I just think I don't know. I just wanted to make the point that there are, there's different flavors of developers. There's different flavors of DBAs, and hopefully you're in an environment where people realize that, and they realize that everybody's on a journey of learning, and that we all started knowing nothing.
Yeah.
We all came into the world, and our heads was all of our heads were all empty. and it's only filled with the stuff that that's been put into it up to this point.
Yeah.
I can't, if I was never a SQL developer, I can build tables and I can do stored procedures and do some of that stuff, but I'm not going to do it as quickly as someone else who
Mhm.
done that for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah, that's I mean that kind of goes back to that other thing too of like we talked about last week with imposter syndrome is
Mhm.
it's also okay to not know things. Like
Absolutely.
yeah. Like sometimes if you're over your head in a situation, well you're the actual imposter, so you need to actually reach out and go talk to your DBA if you actually have no clue what you're doing. Um, there are those times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I didn't come full circle on the details. So the tweet
Yep.
that got talked about
oh yeah, that's what
was
you're
somebody
I'm
made
like
a list of, you're not a web developer unless you know these things. And there was like 10 things. And yeah, the
Boo.
whole internet did what both of you did. And then I chimed in too. I was like, this just discourages people
Yeah.
because almost everybody said, well, I don't, most of that stuff on your list, I don't ever use.
Yeah.
Some of it, I don't even know what it is,
mm-hmm.
but I'm a web developer and I have been for X years or whatever. And so it's just this idea that you have to, I think you have to have a certain level of competency in
Yeah.
things. And I guess, somebody, I guess a hiring manager, has to figure out what those competencies are and what levels are acceptable.
Hey, real
But
quick, what do
I
you
don't know,
call a doctor who gets all C's in college?
still a doctor.
Right. So a junior web
I
developer who
thought this was
doesn't
a
know every
joke coming on, and I was really trying to figure out the punchline, but I got you now.
they're a doctor. So
yes.
if you
Gotcha.
if you can't get all 10 things on that list and you're a junior developer, you're still a developer, right?
Yeah.
Go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, that's totally fine.
Yep.
And there's certainly, degrees of experience levels.
Well, yeah.
Somebody at 2 years knows ideally less than the person who's been doing something 5 years or 6 years. Hopefully you
Mhm.
don't have 2 years of experience that you're just repeating,
Yes.
but you're
Yeah.
actually learning
Mhm.
new things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really critical. I don't know how we got off onto this topic, but I feel like it's important.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's fun.
Well, I mean, even in this conversation, that this stream, you mentioned something that I'm becoming more and more competent. I'm learning, and I thought I had knew at least a decent amount of features that SQL Server has. And you mentioned something. You said that SQL Ledger, and I was like, that sounds familiar. And so I had to Google it real quick, right? And so
yeah,
like I'm going into work every day as an engineer, and people ask me questions and we're collaborating on things, and I'm asking questions and it goes back and forth. And here it is. There's a feature that I probably should know exists, and I had to Google it real quick and be like, oh wait. And then I realized kind of it's related to blockchain. Apparently, it's cryptographically hashed. Very interesting.
yeah,
We'll look it up the rest later. But I mean, that shouldn't discourage us, right? That should
yeah,
not. We're never going to know everything. It will never happen.
I
yeah.
want to get a shirt too that says I googled the different joins because every time I have to do a join, I'm like inner, outer,
It's like
just
Billy Buttons, inner,
join.
outer.
Here's what I would ask you not to do, and I'm doing this specifically, bringing this up about joins because of something I saw
Oh,
today.
was it? Oh, I like that I did that you finally saw.
No, not that you did. No, please, 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 to the two of you, to the people you work with, to whoever watches this later, please don't use join hints in your queries
Join hints.
and make it do things like,
If your last name's not Mechanic or Ozar, don't do it.
yes, exactly. So a join hint, Sean, would be like you're writing this query and you have to join, 4 tables to each other.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, you write uh, inner hash join or
Okay.
inner loop join. You're telling SQL Server how to physically
I gotcha.
work with the data. So you're tying its hands
Mhm.
and saying, I don't care if this stream has 2 billion rows
Oh god.
and this stream has 10. I want
Put them
you to
together.
loop. I want you to
Oh
loop
god.
this data in a very specific way. Well, you're probably not smarter than SQL Server Engine.
What's
Just don't do that.
what is the point of it being there, I guess? What would be a time when that would be a thing? Or is it not
Well,
and it's just deprecated at this point?
so I mean, you could still do it. You might choose to do it if
I mean
you're
intellectually deprecated, not application deprecated.
okay.
Yeah. As in
Um,
we shouldn't do it because it's already been taken over, but it's still available to be done. Yeah.
yeah. People usually do this when they're trying to fix like some kind of parameter sniffing issue,
Okay.
and that's not the way to do it. Like that's the absolute. Just I would just leave the parameter sniffing issue there rather than do that
Yeah.
because you can
I got
actually
two follow-ups.
create a worse problem. You might fix one parameter sniffing issue by doing something like that, but the next time SQL Server is restarted or you update the stats and that plan, well, you update the stats, a value that's not good for that query plan gets passed in.
Okay.
Now you just created another parameter sniffing issue because you're trying to make it do something it wouldn't normally do with those values.
Forgive me for this statement, but if
Go ahead.
anyone watching this is falling asleep right now, that's why I say database performance tuning isn't actually cool. Be triggered. Yell at me later. Go on.
Yeah, somehow we got into this, but because you were asking about joins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
yeah,
a lot
And
of
I want to
it's a
answer
common
too. I want to answer
question.
too. I'm waiting my turn.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of it's a common question, John. I mean, I see graphs and in infographic things all the time on Twitter and other places about joins. It's really common,
You
and
got your little bubbles and they're like this one and
The
this
Venn
one
diagram.
and this one.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Anthony, what do you want to say about it?
Okay, so the first one I want to lead with an analogy, right? So you know how as engineers our project managers aren't supposed to tell us how to build the thing we're building. They're supposed to trust us to be creative and to be intelligent and to research and
They
to
give
build.
us the why, we provide the how.
Yes.
Yeah.
Using hints is you being that project manager that tells SQL Server the how. So SQL Server looks at all the information it has available, or any, I shouldn't say SQL Server, the RDMS, Oracle or SQL Server, whoever, asks, looks at all the information and then decides what it's building, it's the builder, the plan and how it's going to tackle this. So that's my first thing is like, that's kind of the why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
The other one, so why does it exist? Lee pointed out a good point. Is that a lot of times why it's used is I feel like his answer is people trying to fix certain problems, right? And yeah, I think the reason why it exists was because back in the day, there was very specific use cases where they needed to force something, where they were okay for the fact that it's slow at other times. And I think it was probably a decision to have a lot of foresight. There's a lot of hints that are really specific use case that gets misused, right? Like no lock. Or there's I'm drawing a blank. Which one's the one that is it fast forward? No, it's lead. There's a hint that says, I want you to give me one record as fast as possible. I don't want to Google it in the mid-spiel. Okay, so you don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know.
So there's situations where you're not trying to say, I don't care how big the data set is, you can give it back. Don't optimize for giving me everything. It's going to take me forever to process each row. So I want you to build a plan that gives me the first record as quickly as possible, so I can start processing that. And if it takes you an extra 30 seconds to get the rest of the data, that's fine. My user needs a reaction as soon as you click the button. The problem is, since that has fast
Mm-hmm.
in it, it's worded in a way that people think it's faster. It started being misused for a while. Now we're both gonna have to look that up later, Lee. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's for very specific use cases, but then someone gets a taste of it and it does something good for them once, and then they start putting it all in place.
And this is also a case where, so I'm thinking of another analogy, something I watched from Hugo Cornelius actually recently. You go to SQL Server Fast, FAST.com. So as a software engineer, Sean, you like in C# or whatever you use, you're telling the program exactly what to do step by step, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, depending on the
Stick,
languages, some of it, as languages progress, the environments kind of, we can do less wording and saying, "Hey,
Okay.
we want to do this." I mean, it's essentially the same thing you're talking about. We say,
Okay.
"Give me this," and instead of us having to go through the 15 steps to do that, Visual Studio does it for us. Or C# in
Yeah.
general as a language has adapted to have libraries that does it for us.
Okay. So this that's in general different from what you do with SQL. SQL is a declarative language. You say SQL Server or
Mhm.
database system, give me X, Y, and Z. And the give me X, Y, and Z is your query.
Mm-hmm.
And then the database system figures out the best way to do that. And I think, well, I've heard that part of it, that this is a struggle for people who are into application languages like Java, C#, whatever, and then they try to learn SQL because they're trying to tell the SQL Server how to do the thing. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You just tell it what you want. Anyway, I feel like I'm having random thoughts now because of things that are popping up, but
yeah, and it's fast, and then you give it a number.
And
fast and a number. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
fast
a
and a
new one.
number.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So yeah.
We should probably wrap this up. We've been going like almost 2 hours.
Yeah, say we're a little over, but I think some of that was good to bring up and let it get out there. But yeah, I think if anybody has any questions, we always have the Discord open. There it is. Come hang out. We'll post some extra links and stuff we talked about tonight. Anthony, I think you had a couple for where you can do SQL online. If you're going to put W3 School and that other one you had.
Yeah.
DB Fiddle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
DB
that one.
Fiddle.
Yeah. So hang out in the Discord. Tell your buddies come watch. We will be doing this as of right now every Thursday. And if that changes or goes to more than just every Thursday, we will let you know. Follow our Twitters for updates. Just put them in the chat. And yeah, I can send us over to someone else here. Let's see who's on. Let's send us over to T Rex. He's a Destiny streamer, big in the community. He is currently doing his talk show and podcast. So, seems fitting, right? So let me go ahead and put that in a chat box somewhere. Where am I? Okay. Everybody stick around for the raid. We will, go hang out with T Rex, see what they're talking about. If I can spell his name right. All right. We will catch you all next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.